Hey everybody, this is Melissa Mulligan. Welcome to Chartless. I'm thrilled that you're here with me today. We're just going to dive right in. I'm doing a Q&A, and I'm really excited about the questions that you all sent in to me. Thank you so much. I've narrowed it down to some of my favorites for the first ever Q&A focused Chartless episode here. But we're going to be tackling things today such as, do I think negative feelings or suffering in and of itself is necessary to create meaningful art? My method to the madness of coaching a bunch of different types of other, people and artists and human beings, whether or not I have a low tolerance at this point in my career for people who believe in all of the industry myths that permeate our culture. What did I want to be when I was a kid? Let's see what other, favorite well-known artists that I've coached. Number one myths I wish singers would stop believing. Advice for musicians who are finally trying to make that transition into full-time work. So we've got a lot of ground to cover today. One of the most recent questions that has been filling up my inbox is, where do I stand on life of a showgirl? This is one of the most frequently asked questions in my career, because every time a new Taylor Swift album drops, everybody wants to know what the vocal coaches of the world and the artist development experts think. So we can touch upon that a little bit. It's not the most important thing facing your life today, is what I think of someone else's record. But what I will say though is I have very strong opinions on the reviews of Life of a Showgirl, because I know that you as music makers are paying attention to that. And I know that when other artists get critiqued, there is often a part of us that goes, well, I don't want anybody saying anything like that about me or about my work. And it creates that fear of success, because with success in our field can come more exposure and vulnerability to criticism and trolling and that sort of out of control feeling that so many of us in this industry are aware of and kind of fear, or at least feel a little bit uncomfortable with. So let me talk about this one type of review that I'm seeing a lot of. I am seeing a lot of reviews that talk about Life of a Showgirl through the lens of whether we like it or not. Is the music different because she's quote unquote happy now? She's got Travis. She's having her Cinderella moment with the beautiful ring. So do I think the music sucks because she's happy? Do I think there's a bunch of bangers on this record because she's happy? That lens, that viewpoint really bothers me. Whether you think it's making the music great or interesting or better or whatever. There are two things that bother me. One is more about our culture, and the other is about the false correlation between suffering and art. But can I just zoom out just a little bit and just say, I can't believe that in 2025, we're assuming that someone is happy now once they've got engaged, but they weren't happy before. You don't think Taylor Swift had enough reasons to be content and happy and at peace with who she is as a person and as an artist before now? That seems just really insulting to the notion of individuality. It seems like a very unhealthy way of looking at the human experience, just holistically speaking. And I don't think we just do this to women. I think that in our culture, we get really fixated on this happily ever after fairy tale lore. And I don't think we should do that. I just don't think we should do that. And I don't think you should do that to yourself. I don't think you as an artist or as a listener should be thinking, well, I'll be happy once I find my person or my persons or whatever. That just seems bananas to me, just absolutely bananas. So forget about the fact that one could say, well, what is happiness? What is contentment? It's a passing moment in your life. It's a bunch of moments in your life. Happiness is not a static thing you land on and ride out for the rest of your life. Um, plenty of married people are miserable, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, you could totally take that tactic, but that's not my point. My point is, why are we saying she's happy now? I'm like, as opposed to what? We don't think she was happy before? Come on. So anyway, that's the one reason that bothers me. Suppose you're getting to know a little bit about my worldview, and my view on humanity and the arts right now. But the second reason that it bothers me is more important and more relevant to what we're here to talk about today, which is how to really create amazing music and create an amazing career with your music. So listen, I've seen friends, colleagues, professionals, reviewers, journalists just throwing it out there like, we all know that the best art comes from suffering. We all know that, the best artists and the best poets and the best lyricists were troubled, et cetera. And I'm like, do we though? Do we know that? Here's what I believe I know to be true, as sure as I can be of anything. And this goes to a question that was submitted to me actually before this album came out from Tyler, an artist I've worked with. Hi, Tyler. He says, do you think negative feelings or suffering are necessary to create meaningful art, or just an understanding of suffering? But see, even that question assumes that art requires suffering, that art requires suffering in order to be meaningful and in order to be great. Like as if that needs to be the topic or the perspective or the window that you go through for your creative process. And I negate that. And I think there's just too many examples to the contrary to even begin to name, but I will try. Here's my philosophy on this. Art does not require suffering. Suffering often requires art. So if you are a songwriter or an artist of any kind, you'll probably find that if you look back to when you first started making music, it was coming to you as a cathartic life force, like a survival mechanism, a way of processing and making sense of the world and making sense of your experience. So it didn't cause your creativity. Your creativity was already there, and you used your creativity as a tool to process those very intense experiences, right? So the suffering didn't cause the art. You caused the art, and the creativity that's innately inside of you was able to be a resource for you, right? So I think we have a little bit of a chicken and the egg, like us confusing correlation with causation, which is always a big topic of conversations these days. But you see what I'm saying, right? Like, because when we have an intense emotion, we can rely on our creativity and our ability to use, catharsis to get through those difficult moments. You can falsely start to think, this is how I create. This is what inspires me. This is when I make great music. But that's false. That's a false premise. You can tap into your creativity in a variety of ways. And catharsis is not the only window that you have. It's not the only access point that you have for using your creativity. It's not the only way you can use it. It's there inside of you, and you can use your creativity to do many things in many different ways. The way that I look at songwriting now, very different from when I was a kid, scribbling angry poetry into a notebook day in and day out, which then became my lyric book. I look at it very differently. There are times for me when writing songs feels more like an act of catharsis, an act of processing. And it almost feels like abstract art, you know? I'm like the songwriting version of a, I mean, not as talented, but maybe a songwriting version of like a Jackson Pollock approach, where it's like everything's just going to come out and there's no wrong answers because this is just me, raw and unfiltered. And if I want to go back and frame it a particular way or, edit later, I can. But there's no point other than just bearing my soul right this very second. And it feels almost like if I don't do it right now, I'm just gonna not be able to breathe. That's one way, right? But then there are other times when writing a song feels more like building a house. The idea is grand. The concept, the inspiration, what I want to say. And it might not even be something about me. It might just be a story that I feel like I want to tell, or a metaphoric statement, or some sort of world that I want to build, inside of music. And that feels daunting. It feels a lot more like building a house. Like I have to sketch out the plans and then I have to build it, and it's going to require other instrumentation and production and editing, and I've got to think it through and maybe get other people involved, and it can take a while. Some songs don't just pour out of you in 3 or 4 minutes and brilliant, it's done. Some things really take a lot of time and attention to detail and a team, and they are no less meaningful. Like how you get there doesn't give it meaning, right? Meaning is in the ears of the listeners at the end of the day. So I encourage you, if you ever find yourself concerned about this, if you ever say, yeah, I typically only write when I'm upset or depressed. And what if someday I find my person, and or I get older and I'm accomplished and have reached my goals, and am I never going to be able to write again because I only write when I'm upset? I'll tell you 2 things that will put you at ease. Number one is, no matter what happens to you, you can always find ways to be upset. You can always find things to experience existential dread about. You can always find empathy and find your depth, of your sympathy for yourself or anyone else. If you decide that that's a well you want to keep going to for your creativity. But also, I would suggest that good news, maybe you just haven't peaked yet at your craft. Maybe there's all these other ways of accessing your innate creativity that you haven't even dug into yet. So now my assignment to you is to go and find artists. You can Google it, use ChatGPT, whatever you use to look for new music, whatever searching tools you use. Find artists that are creating things from a different point of view. Find artists that are making things out of joy, hope, gratitude, or social causes that you believe in, or spirituality, or the soul, or whatever. Find people that are just telling stories, and it's very, very easy to find. And find the greatest love songs, but let's not make it all about romantic love. Let's find things that are about friendship and family relationships and community. There are endless examples of great music being made from a different vantage point. Okay, moving on. And thank you for that question. And thank you for indulging my answer. What's your top advice? This is from Stella. What's up, Stella? What's your top advice for musicians who are leaving their quote unquote day job to go full time with their music? Honestly, I think my top advice would be to get with a mentor. Stella, you have me in your life. Those of you listening, you can certainly, fill out my little form on mastermindroad.com if you want, and we can chat. But my top advice would be to get with a mentor, specifically someone who's done it, and have a couple of planning sessions where you really figure out the finances and your sustainable income plan, and then go for it. And then absolutely go for it. I can share the way that I did it if you're curious. Here's the way that I did it. I had a more than fine, more than lucrative enough day job in a medical device firm. I was a marketing director um, before I went full time permanently as a self employed musician. Um, and here's what I did. I, first of all, saved a lot and paid off anything that I owed. I was very, 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 very lucky that my young self decided to do a college option that was not going to require any college debt. Um, so if you're not at that part of your journey, I think that's helpful if possible. Um, but so yeah, so I put some money aside for sure, and I did a couple of things that I think that I know really helped me. The first one was I worked at creating an income stream in music. Like I figured out what business model could make sense for me financially. And I did as much of it as I could until I couldn't do both things anymore. And that's common advice. Like, wait until you are so busy that you can't do both things anymore. And then I had to make a leap because I knew I was going to take a financial hit. But I did the math to make sure that I had padding, for a few months if need be. And then I did the math to figure out exactly how many gigs, clients, et cetera, I was going to need to have for my sustainable income plan in music. And the second that I was out of my day job, I, I worked, I don't know, I probably worked 60 to 80 hours a week building up my work, like gaining the clients, gaining the gigs, doing the marketing, doing the outreach, doing the networking. I said yes to everything that made sense to say yes to. And I said no to the things that were maybe just more about people pleasing and less about really fueling my soul and my career plans. And it worked. It wasn't that hard. Honestly, but I was willing to. It wasn't that hard for me because I was willing to work day in and day out, and I didn't expect immediate results or great results, and I didn't come at it with a sense of entitlement. There's a difference between worthiness and entitlement. I felt worthy of having a full-time career in music, but I didn't feel entitled to one. I knew that it was going to be hard. And I knew so many really hardworking, really talented, kind people in my community that were struggling to make ends meet, and they had been at it for longer than me. And so I didn't go into it naive in any way. But I just figured, I just, I really trusted myself to do the work and to ask for help when I needed it in terms of advice. And I was able to grind it out, and that's a story for another podcast of my full-time life as a full-time musician. But yeah, really good times. And I highly recommend doing it. I mean, do it, make the plan and do it. Don't hem and haw. Make the plan, execute the plan, do it. It doesn't need to take forever to get there. That's my short answer. Um, Winnie wants to know, as a coach, do you have a method to the madness of coaching other people? I do. I do have a method. The method is that when I meet an artist, I throw all assumptions of what they need out the window. And I really take my time. I try very hard not to give advice until I really feel like I understand what the artist needs from me. Um, what their learning style is, what vibe they prefer. And I really try to be a grounded chameleon, if that makes sense. Like, I know who I am. I know the industry very well. I know artists very well. I'm very grounded in like who I am and what I have to offer and who I'm good at helping and who maybe I'm not the best fit for. So I'm like, okay, I'm fine. This is not about me, right? So if my first session with an artist can just be all about them, then I can do my work. But I really need to understand, you know. So it's a lot of listening, a lot of clarifying questions. I find that artists, when they first come to me, often want to, you know, we are trained to not complain, not bitch, to be very grateful. We are trained to fake it till you make it. And therefore, the first time I meet with someone, it's usually like, everything's great. And I'm really grateful. And I did this and I have this album and this is very common. I have this album that I did with my team, and you know, we're going to drop it next month, and I'm really excited about it. And I'm wondering if you can help me figure out how to market it, right? That's a very, very common first interaction. And then I'm trying to get at the heart of like, who are you? What do you really want to happen? How can I really, really help you, right? And so when I start asking questions about, so tell me about the music. And after this album, what other songs do you have? Because once you release something, you're kind of on a ticking clock to follow it up. So, you know, why release the album all at once? What's the next batch of songs? What are you most excited about that you're writing these days? What's your creative process? Like all of that, right? And once we start talking on that level, that's when other things start to come up. Like, well, honestly, I'm releasing this album because I'm not super passionate about these songs and I just want to get it over with. I have this other batch of songs, but I don't have the money to get a producer for those songs and I'm not really sure what to do with them. And so I just figured I already spent all this time making this album. I don't want to waste it. I want to put it out, you know. And that's when we can start to really get into like, okay, what's really going on here? I'd rather not coach you on how to slap a bunch of band-aids on the chaos, you know. I would rather go deep into, but what is it that you really want to do? Like, what if we just said, forget about what's happened in the past, forget about all the other advice you've ever gotten. What if we just started fresh today? What's the song? And what do we need to do to make it so that you're empowered creatively, professionally, from a production standpoint, et cetera, to just immediately say, I can do whatever I want. And this is the creative pursuit that I really want to follow. So I don't know if that truly answers your question, Win, but basically it's for me, it's about listening and asking a lot of questions. When it comes to vocal coaching, that's really fun. Vocal coaching for me is a very creative pursuit. And I can't even really boil down for you what happens when I'm in a vocal coaching session. But so many times, probably at least once a week, I find myself making up a new warm up exercise, a sound that I want an artist to try. I've been doing it for so long. I've been doing it full time, day in and day out for so long. You know, they talk about the 10,000 hours. I'm double that easily, right? That it becomes intuitive, which is very cool for me because I used to witness my vocal coach, Mariana Vagnini, be that way. Like when she first started really training me to be a professional vocal coach, that was, easily 20 years ago. And I remember like knowing my stuff and then watching her work with my students and go, do me a favor, like stick your tongue to the roof of your mouth when you do that, you know? And I'm like, you've been my coach for like over a decade. I've never seen you tell anybody to do that ever. What made you think of that? She's like, oh, it was an intuitive thing. I just wanted to try it and see, you know. But now I see myself being able to draw on intuition and sometimes making things up on the fly to really try to help an artist's body do what my mind knows their voice needs from them. And that is absolutely incredibly fun. But again, I'm an artist centric person. Being an artist myself, you know, I have to be. I'm not a method forward coach. I like to know all the methods that everyone's using and all the literature that everyone's reading, and then pull from, you know, the through line of great anatomy and a great like anatomical understanding, right? As much artistic psychology as I'm able to bring to the table after all these years of doing it. And then it's just nothing else exists except the music that the artist wants to make. And as long as I trust myself to understand that, if I trust myself to really understand what sounds the artist wants to make and the musical landscape they want to live in, I can help them make that connection in the moment. And there is just nothing better than that. There's absolutely nothing better than that. So thank you, Wynn. That is a great question. Let's see. April wants to know, hi, April and Kira, what leads you to be so passionate in helping young artists and parents? And what are the struggles you encountered when you were young? What lessons have you learned about it that can be applied to the new generation? Okay. What leads me to be so passionate in helping young artists and parents probably would be the struggles that I encountered. They say that, right? That like coaches wind up kind of, you know, like you heal yourself, your inner young adult, by working with a lot of young adults. So I'm not exactly sure. I guess I haven't thought about it enough yet to really know what the link is between like what I encountered when I was younger, except, you know, the same old societal myths of this is a hobby, not a career. That definitely leads me to be very passionate to help the parents of kids today. But also, I think a lot of it too was academic music made me feel untalented, not good enough. And I definitely have an issue with that I'm very vocal about, you know, that I believe that music education, it is getting better. And I think part of it is because graduates of my music career mastermind program, some of them are now music teachers, and they are bringing what we did in mastermind into the classrooms, which is amazing. Bring me more. I want to work with more future music educators. If you want to go into music education, please reach out to me. I am so passionate about changing music ed. So what I know to be true, because I wind up working with these kids when they're in their teens and 20s and 30s, okay? But I know this to be true, is that the best musicians are not only ignored and overlooked, but they are spoken down to and made to feel less than in school, in music classes, and in choirs. They are told to, not all. There are some awesome, and I've been part of them, like growing up. I'm not saying all, right? But it does happen way too often that really talented, creative music makers are told that's not music. They are told to blend if they have a big vibrato, an R&B sound, grit in their voice. They're told that they are going to ruin their voices forever if they sing pop music or rock music or hip hop, or certain types of country. Even like anything contemporary is like historically been frowned upon in the academic world. So what are we doing? I mean, we have these super creative kids. Like I was afraid to sing in front of people until, I don't know, maybe my sophomore year in high school, because I would audition for things at, local, I don't know, churches, regional theaters, or school. And I didn't want to sound like a legit musical theater kid. I certainly didn't want to sound like a classical singer. Um, Although I wound up, training in all modalities and have an amazing appreciation for all of it and dabble in all of it now. But as a kid, I wanted to be, I don't know, Amy Mann meets Robert Smith or something. I really liked that stuff. And it was very, very, very depressing and demoralizing to be told that you don't know what you're doing and you're not good. Oh, and here's the other thing is that a lot of musically gifted kids play music by ear. And I work with teens and 20 somethings every day whose band leaders and choir directors like kicked them out and said, you can never be a professional if you don't learn how to read music. And nothing could be further from the truth. Like it might be on your roadmap at some point if you decide that you want to be in orchestration. But if you want to be in the contemporary world, you're making up your own music. You don't need sheet music for it, and it's way more important to be able to hear what the band is playing, figure out what key they're in, and play along. You're not going to ask them for cheat sheets, in the middle of those types of sessions. So having a great ear should be celebrated and cultivated. And instead, we have a lot of students being put down on the regular for it. And so, yeah, I guess that's a huge part of what leads me to be very passionate about this. I want to work with the creatives who aren't getting any structure. It's like you have to choose between something that is so structured and sideways of the help that you need, or you're stuck with nothing. I mean, I suppose there are some very, very fine, franchises like School of Rock. I wind up working with a lot of kids who did School of Rock. But again, like it's a pretty niche specific thing. And it's not necessarily geared toward, you on your own creating the next big thing, that's, your wild and wonderful and wacky idea. It's still older people saying like, here's the music from my day, kid, which is it's not what I'm after in the work that I'm doing. So thank you for that lovely question. Let's see. Another good question is, what's the real difference between coaching singers for stage versus coaching singers for the studio? This is a lovely question. I feel like Elise Myers, great question. I'd love to tell you. Okay, the real difference between coaching singers for stage versus studio. In some ways, there doesn't need to be a huge difference in terms of you building the fundamental building blocks of vocal anatomy, vocal health, and maintenance. Very similar. Okay. But if you came to me with a brand new song and you were about to go on the road, let's say, and this is just real life scenarios in my world. Okay. So in my world, I usually don't get a singer who's like, I just want to take lessons and get better. Typically, I'm working with a singer who's like, I'm about to go on tour and I have these many dates over these many months, and I need my voice to survive. I need to be in good health, and I need to have a great stage version of this song ready to go. So my focus there is on a couple of things. Number one, is it the right key for you to do night after night after night after night when your voice is getting fatigued. You can have great technique. Your voice is going to get fatigued. You're not going to be sleeping the best. You might get dried out depending upon where you're traveling to. So it's very common for artists to have touring keys for the songs that they're performing. It's not that they can't sing them live, but we want to strategically minimize effort. So in that case, I might even be working with their music director to not only change the key, but to okay, where do you want to pipe in like a double on the chorus, maybe in the backing tracks, so that it's getting fuller, but the singer can still just sort of keep things moderate for them. We work on the staging. We work on making sure that you're controlling your breath while you're moving and hitting your marks. We definitely work on pitch if there's an issue there in any way. And of course, just the overall delivery, the impact, the dynamics, everything that you would think goes into building out a stage performance on a song. When we're talking about prepping for the studio, this is very different. This is very, very different. So in that case, we are also playing with the key of the song. Doesn't matter if you've been singing it live in the same key for months or a year or whatever, I'm still going to want to hear it in a bunch of different keys. And I know we're in the right key when I believe you, when I really believe that you mean what you say. And I will coach you until I believe you. So we're going to try a bunch of different things. We're going to try it. That first verse, that first verse, I don't want anybody hitting skip on Spotify, So it's like, let's try it breathy. Let's try it with over enunciating. If it's super intense, let's try it lazy. Let's try it spin around in circles and do some jumping jacks before I hit record. Let's hear what happens when you're out of breath. Let's hear what happens when you're on the floor. Like, what do we need to do? Because when we're making a record together, we are painting with a much, 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 much smaller brush. It's if you ever, I'm fascinated with acting, with film actors and stage actors, and I've trained here and there, and certainly I've people that I've coached vocally are on Broadway and in film, and they're voiceover actors and stuff. So I mean, this is adjacent to what I do, right? So when you listen to great film actors and directors talk about that process, they're talking about, hey, the camera might be inches from my face and I have to look at a wall and pretend that, I'm saying goodbye to the love of my life in some sort of war-torn country. And really, I need it to just be in my eyes. I need there to just be a flicker of my eyelid or an eyelash in order for the camera to believe me. That's the level of detail and nuance that I get into when we're in the studio. So it's everything. It's about the way that you're breathing, the way that maybe you're not breathing. It has nothing to do with vocal technique or, people will say to me, oh, well, I sang this, but you can really tell in this recording, you can really tell that I'm not using my diaphragm. And I'm like, no, you can't. Maybe you feel like you can because you know yourself, but like no one is listening no one wants to hear a stomach muscle. No, when you're singing, no one's listening for that. What the problem is that you're singing from a self-conscious place and a self-protective place, which is I'm singing in a way that keeps people from criticizing my ability to sing. I'm singing so that nobody calls me out on not having good vocal technique. And that is not art. And that is also not the acting part of vocal recording, honestly, So it's very difficult for a singer to listen to their own vocal takes from the perspective of someone else's nervous system's response to their singing. That's a tall order. So that's why I like to be in the room and at the helms if I can be, if we're working together in person. or even remotely. I do a lot of vocal coaching and vocal production remotely with artists now. And inevitably, as I'm kind of coaching them and throwing them off balance and trying to get them out of their head and just sort of playing around to see what works, inevitably they'll do a take that's a little weird for them. And I'll go, that's it, at the exact same time that they're going, oh, I'm sorry, just delete that. That sucked. So, but eventually, a few times around together, and the artist, I see it, I see the shift. I see them get playful and creative and intentional, and they start to know more how to access that different way of approaching singing in the studio. They start to hear it more in their own playback. And then my artists who produce themselves need me less and less to be there while they are doing those recordings until they get stuck or they're trying to do something new, or they're taking a new approach to something or they have something that's uniquely challenging to them. So it is, I thank you for that question. I might have been Katie who sent that in a while ago to me, but I really appreciate that question because that's clearly one of my favorite topics on earth. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with this one today. It is there a difference between coaching signed or famous artists versus independent aspiring artists versus young, like teenage aspiring artists, or sometimes teenagers are professionals in their own right as well? Is there a difference between those different categories? For me, once it's me and the artist in the room, there is no difference. There is literally no difference. I can tell you without hesitation that the most famous artists that I've worked with were delightfully humble and very nervous to be with the vocal coach. Like I'm nervous, whether they've done it before and have had not good experiences. Very common, very common. Vocal coaches, just saying, don't make your artists feel like they don't know what they're doing. Nobody wants to feel that way about the thing they love the most, and it's just no need. So a lot of artists are like, I worked with a coach and she said this and I disagreed, or she wanted me to make these stupid sounds and it made me feel dumb, or he told me that blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so they're either nervous because of that or they're nervous because they've never been with a vocal coach and they know that they're not singing quote unquote correctly. And they're sort of terrified that they're going to have to unlearn everything, break the house down and rebuild it, which you never want to do. You never want to do with an artist. It's not necessary. But here's the thing, like famous artists, signed artists, they are artists and they have not forgotten what made them want to make music in the first place. And I think one of the things that I worry about the most is that when I'm working with an artist who like then gets signed and is on tour, like if I'm working with them beforehand, here is what changes. My access sometimes gets reduced. Like we'll still have each other's number and we'll keep in touch and stuff, but suddenly it's like the management and the label is deciding when they're getting vocal coaching and when they need it. And they can't always just have regular vocal coaching in the budget just because they want it. And they can't always have regular vocal coaching, even if it's in the budget, just because of time. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I was holding, an entire week here in New York City to do tour support with an artist that just kept getting pushed back further and further and further because they had to do press and they had to go to LA and then they had to go to Europe. And I'm like, well, we could do, Zoom, but the schedule's so crazy. And then the next thing you know, I'm getting, an urgent text from, an artist like, I just got off the plane in Hong Kong and I have no voice and I don't know what to do. I'm like, well, it's 3 a.m. my time. So this is going to be a little bit of a tricky fix, So the difference is more in the logistics. It's really not in terms of what they need or the type of emotional support that they need from me, or the type of technical training or assistance that they need. Um, I would say that one thing that is really great about working with a professional artist and that doesn't mean signed today. God knows, one of the coolest things about working with a professional artist is that um, the immediate challenge for me is like this artist knows who they are. So how do I make sure that that is able to be to come through in their voice consistently, sustainably, and at the highest possible level, at the highest possible standard. And we've got like no time to make that happen. That's a unique challenge. With an aspiring artist, there's more elasticity around the artist identity. Sometimes the artist identity is just barely underneath the surface and I can see it, but the artist hasn't yet fully let go to fully express that. That type of work is really, really, really fun. And there's more room and more space for exploration, as well as for building up really sustainable technique. It's really great when your signature sound is developed while we are creating really sound technique and really healthy habits inside of you as a singer. So the difference is more in terms of, not in terms of, how I need to approach the one-on-one time, the interaction time, but maybe just in terms of like what we need to focus on and the structure and the container around it. Thank you so much for joining me for this very special episode of Chartless. I love you all. Thank you so much for listening. Be good to each other and yourselves. I will see you soon. Thanks again for hanging out with me today, everybody. This has been Chartless. I am Melissa Mulligan. For those of you who've been asking, there are ways to get in touch with me directly. You can find me and my bio and a coaching request form on melmulligan.com. That's MELMULLIGAN.com. And you can learn more about all the things we do at Music Career Mastermind by going to mastermindroad.com. And that is mastermind, ROAD, like our roadmap.com. I love you guys. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. And I will talk to you soon.